What is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
All right, what is it? Sunday night already? How did that happen? Sunday night. Hope everybody had a great weekend. They say that Sydney Sweeney episode on SNL had one of the highest viewership numbers in the show's history. For unknown reasons, I'm telling you, I can't figure it out. No idea. No idea. How's everybody doing? We got Turtles. We got Rosie in the chat. Good to see ya. Looks like Rosie got the first like of the stream. That means double good karma for Rosie. Double good karma. In these troubled times, that's going to come in handy. All right. So what is it? Sunday again? Yeah, it's Sunday, right? Sunday. All right. Yes, I hope everybody had a great weekend. Let's go through the Izzy. How you doing? Good to see you in the chat. All right. Third chat. Well, that's not first. Third like, that's not first like. So, but you still get a good, healthy dose. Really, every dose of good karma from Radio Baloney is like 1.5 from like a normal channel, which they don't even give out karma there anyway. I'm pretty much the only one that does. So anyway, it's good. It's good. All right. Let's go through the menu. See what we're going to be talking about tonight. We'll get to the chat, then we'll go back and go through everything in detail. So Sam Harris is at it again, being just a dingbat. Just a dingbat. What happened to him? It's too much meditation. I think there's probably a perfect amount. I've done meditation before, and I found that it helped me. Not like silent meditation, like where I'm off on a mountaintop or something for a month by myself. No, nothing like that. But I've dabbled with it, and I found it kind of useful. But I think that there's probably too much that you can do. I think you can end up doing too much, and then you just go kind of crazy. So we're going to take a look at that. And also Gad Sad had a response to him. He's been very critical of Sam Harris over the years since Sam Harris became totally TDS. We're going to talk about Mark Carney. Video was surfaced of Mark Carney stating that he offered pro bono consulting to politicians. Why would he do that? So that Brookfield shareholders could profit from the policies. Of course. Mark Carney is about as detached from the common man, I think, as it's possible to get. And Canada's losing lots of jobs, by the way, right now. So, and the polls are starting to tighten up, by the way. We've got Pierre Poilievre. Let's hear on him. We've got a couple of things here from him. I think he's getting stronger. I think that he's starting to focus more on just all of those things that Canadians really hated about the last 10 years. And I think that is really the winning message. The tariff thing is dying down already. So Mark Carney is not going to have that. And then it will come down to, do you want all the awful things from the last 10 years that Mark Carney was advising Trudeau to do? And I think that Carney has hit the high water mark, and now it's just going to go down. His tide is going to ebb from here on out. Let's see, Canada election. We got a Liberal candidate in the Greater Toronto area, and here he is singing a glorious ode to China, the CCP, and he's in uniform doing it. And this is the state of the Liberal Party. So not good. Not good. We got some crazy stuff going on, just crazy Canada stuff. Doge. Got Dr. Oz talking about some waste and fraud going on. We've got the Trump tariffs. They're working. What I've been saying all along is happening. Let's move through. Okay, so you've got big protests in France over the whole Le Pen thing, over them. I mean, what just looks exactly like authoritarian abuse of a political rival. So, what will happen in Europe? I don't know, but I feel like there's going to be big trouble because there's too many people who are not being heard. In fact, the people that represent them are getting arrested. So not good. That's not a good sign for democracies. And of course, it's politically motivated. Let's see. What do we got here? The UK. So you got this mother here who's been thrown in jail for 2 years for writing something naughty on the internet. So Airstrip 1 is still at it. We've got some memes. Oh, you know what? We got to update this because I got some new ones. We've got some memes. So we'll go through those. And then we have the last tab in which we go through a bunch of random stuff. And yeah, we got some Elon Musk in there and a bunch of stuff. So it's actually not that much stuff, but we got some stuff. Anyway, so we'll go through all of that. And otherwise, let's get to the chat. What is going on? All right. So we've got the chat working. So the last 2 streams, the chat wasn't working, showing up on the stream. There was a problem with the Rumble Studio, but looks like we're looking good tonight. Are they going to give me some ads to read? There's ads there. Fantastic. All right. Let's get to the chat and then we'll get started. Let's see. Rosie says the viewership number could be due to her nursing mummy apparel. She knows what she's got. And she's taking full advantage of it. And why not? Let's see. Turtle says, it's all good. Such a rainy day in the Pacific Northwest. Oh, dear. Rosie says, rainy in East Tennessee all day today. I guess it's just rainy everywhere. Nevada makes a great point. How you doing, Nevada? Hit that like button, he says. Hit that like button. That's the best advice you've ever gotten in your life. Also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel right now. It's super important. I can't tell you right now, but just trust me on this one. Also, liking the stream. Very fashionable right now. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Just do it. All right. So that's all that. And let's just get started, shall we? All right. So let's take a look at Sam Harris here. So Dave Smith posted this. He says, Sam's correct. The only reason that anybody even knows who I am is because of Joe Rogan. I should have earned it the old-fashioned way by having my mother create the Golden Girls. And then he calls him an effing clown. So Sam Harris does mention Dave Smith in here. He talks about Joe Rogan, how it's all so irresponsible. So Sam Harris has become the uber credentialist at this point. Nobody's opinion matters except for those people in those hallowed elitist halls and those ivory towers, the experts, the people with the credentials. Now, word expert don't mean what it used to these days, does it? Not after the last, I don't know, at least 5 years. The word expert just don't seem to mean what it used to mean. But Sam Harris is very, very upset with people hearing things that are not coming through the approved channels. Let's hear what he has to say.
Joe is a genuinely good guy who wants good things for people. But he is honestly in over his head on so many topics of great consequence.
So when all of the experts said that if you get the jab, you can't get the coof and you can't spread the coof. So when they all said that, wouldn't say Joe Biden said that. Was he in over his head? Were they all in over their heads? I'm not sure Sam would make that point.
Right. When he brings someone on to just shoot the shit about, how the Holocaust is not what you think it was, right? And maybe Churchill's the bad guy in World War II.
Was that Tucker?
Or he's got Dave Smith, being treated.
Yeah, so that wasn't Joe Rogan. That was Tucker Carlson. And I'm sorry. I mean, look, I think the idea, I think the Holocaust is exactly how it's being described. And I think that Winston Churchill was clearly not the villain of World War II. That just doesn't make any sense. But I prefer people having the opportunity to say it and hear it because you do need the marketplace of ideas. Best ideas will win. If you get rid of those ideas, which I think are wrong, it's throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That's my point. You're throwing out all the good ideas as well. And then you're just relying on some credentialized class that has its own interests and its own perverse incentives. And we've kind of seen how that goes. But let's continue.
As an expert on uh, Israel and Palestine and the history of that conflict and the moral emergency that came to the world's attention on October 7th, and what is appropriate to think in the aftermath of all of that, right? Dave Smith is the only reason why anyone knows what Dave Smith thinks about any of this is very likely because Joe had him on multiple times to talk about it, right? He's a pure misinformation artist, and on top of many others. And when Joe talks to someone like Trump or Tucker Carlson or any of these other guys who lie as freely as they breathe and doesn't push back against any of their lies. In fact, in Trump's case, really fairly energetically helped put his lies into the most plausible possible shape. It is irresponsible. I mean, it is directly harmful. Our society is as politically shattered as it is, in part because of how Joe has interacted with information.
Are you sure it's not that the experts, the people reading the teleprompters on the news, the politicians, have just obviously demonstrably lied over and over and over again? Are you sure that's not why? Are you sure that didn't open up a space for like the Joe Rogans, for the Dave Smiths, for everybody, for me, to say, hey, they're obviously lying, right? They're obviously lying. But anyway, let's continue.
Again, I don't think this is, I think a lot of this is inadvertent, or maybe all of it's inadvertent. But it is also avoidable, right? He could actually take the responsibility that really is his to take at this point to get his facts straight and have someone other than Jamie there riding shotgun with him. Where, I mean, he could have two brilliant journalists whose full-time job, he could pay each of them $1 million a year just to sit there and do and make sure he doesn't put his foot in his mouth.
So Sam Harris approved, or I guess I don't know, New York Times approved, or maybe an MSNBC approved censor on his show. That's the solution. I'm old fashioned, right? I'm old fashioned. I still feel like there is a value, right, in like a bunch of ideas being out there and people being free to hear them, to dispute them, whatever, to prove them false, to prove them right, whatever. And it seems like this whole free speech thing and freedom of expression thing has actually worked out pretty well for Western civilization. I know that we're facing some challenges now, but that's not from freedom of expression. It's from people who want to get rid of it. It's from the people that are in the same mind frame as a Sam Harris. But anyway, let's continue.
In a colossally irresponsible way, right? I mean, it's like it would be very simple to do a better job.
I don't know, when like he was totally behind the 50 intelligence experts who said that the Hunter Biden's laptop had all the hallmarks of Russian interference, without ever actually telling anybody what these hallmarks were. No, they never told anybody. They didn't actually put it down. There was no point form thing like, well, it's this and this and this and this. No, they just said all the hallmarks of Russian interference, Russian election interference, and then just didn't tell anybody what that was. Just, no, it's got the hallmarks. That's enough. Well, what are the hallmarks? We're experts. Trust the experts. We have the credentials. So, what do I think of this? I made a few notes here. And then we'll get to Gad Said, which I actually haven't watched yet, his response to this. So I'll watch that with you. But he's describing here his desire for basically a technocratic elitist utopia, which I think we could all make a pretty clear guess. That's a pretty good guess that would be in reality just a technocratic elitist dystopia. Because I think we've learned we can't just trust people because they flash their credentials in front of us anymore. Those days are over now. I'm not saying they have no value. Credentials have no value ever. I'm just saying that the credentials that we see, the people with the credentials we see are chosen. They're the ones who are chosen to hew to an already approved narrative. I don't see how it could be much more obvious than that. So he wants us to worship credentialism. You know, do you have a BA, a master's, a PhD, right? Each level up here, your ideas are more and more important. Do you have a BA, a master's, a PhD? Well, where did you get that PhD? And then undergirding that, it's just politics and political correctness and personal biases, right? And that adds the fatal flaw in this whole kind of technocratic totalitarian view or aspiration, right? It's because your credentials don't matter if you have bad ideas or if you're following perverse incentives or you're just outright biased, if you're an ideologue. It doesn't matter anymore. The only thing that matters at that point is just the abstract idea that you're worshiping. If you're an ideologue, reality doesn't matter. All that matters is that abstraction that you're following, the idea. So that's the fatal flaw in this whole thing, right? Is that these things are corrupt. This system of just experts and credentials that, essentially star chambers that it sounds like Sam Harris is in favor of. If they're not corrupt when they start, they become corrupt very quickly. And who could say that our academic institutions, or really just any institution, any of the institutions have been run or are being run today by, reality and reason? No, they're being run by ideology at this point. Once they were much closer to that, to being objective, but ideological capture pretty much rules Western institutions today. Medical institutions, obviously academic institutions. Again, like the AMA doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman anymore. Basic biology, the whole basic biology thing. And they seem to be just fine with permanently medicalizing, sterilizing, mutilating children for being born in the wrong body. I'm doing that with quote fingers right now, as if that made any sense. None of that's based on reality. None of that's based on biology, right? That's just ideology. It's just an idea, an abstraction. So we do well not to trust those people, because you don't need to be a medical expert to know that perhaps the cure for, suicidal ideations in a 15-year-old is not to sterilize them or chop their body up or tell them that they're born in the wrong body. You don't need to be a medical expert to be highly suspicious of that treatment method. But the Sam Harrises of the world would have you just say, well, no, they've got the credentials. No, they must be right. They must be right. You can't let somebody go on Joe Rogan who might disagree with those experts. So what we have now are experts, and then in quotes, experts trademark. So the experts trademark are the ones that you see on CNN or MSNBC or the CBC. They can be relied upon to all agree with the approved narrative every single time. And of course, they're screened for that, right? One example is Alan Dershowitz. He used to be on CNN and quoted in the New York Times, and he used to be, in left-wing. He used to be kind of a left-wing media darling, actually, until he defended Trump in the impeachment. Then completely gone. Just totally persona non grata. All of a sudden, he wasn't an expert anymore. Oh, he was an expert, a constitutional expert, but he wasn't expert trademark anymore. Right? Like, yeah, you have scientists, and then you have sciencism cis now, right? Or scientist trademark, scientist TM. So, yeah, so now we have experts, but then also experts TM. And they're not the same thing. One is objective and one is political. When you have experts, the experts TM spouting clear lies, credentialism collapses, as it shouldn't. That's why we've seen it. This is why people are more interested. This is why people are interested in watching Joe Rogan now, seeing the people who Joe Rogan has on. This is why people are fleeing mainstream media. Because they know that the experts aren't really experts. So they're not behaving as experts, and they're not behaving ethically. They're pushing something. People realize when they're being sold a bill of goods. So again, it's not that there aren't people with, objective knowledge and expertise. It's just that they're, those people who are objective and have ethics are at the back of the line, behind those that can be relied upon to just spout the party line, again, on CBC or the BBC or CNN or MSNBC or NBC News, wherever, or to the New York Times. And it's not a good thing, right? Like, it's not, we should be able to have some level of trust, and appeal to authority somewhat, obviously, because we know there are people that are objective. It's just that, again, they're at the back of the line. And even if they want to dispute, they're limited in how they can do it. I mean, you can write a blog post that nobody will see, and then maybe still you end up getting fired because of it. So, what somebody like Joe Rogan is providing is the wisdom of crowds, and some of it's right, some of it's wrong, but there does tend to be a consensus formed, and it tends to usually be right. You have the madness of crowds as well, as Douglas Murray wrote about. But I think we do need the wisdom of crowds now. I think the wisdom of crowds is what got Trump elected, which is going to be very good for the United States, even though every expert was against him. And besides, like, the Trump administration is full of very highly credentialed people. What does Sam Harris think of them? Probably not very much. I'm going to guess not very much. Because Sam Harris has just become political, no longer objective. And it's kind of sad. But you could see it coming. I mean, years ago, he wrote The Moral Landscape, which was, how society could be ruled by just pure reason. It turns out that, yeah, when you just try for pure reason, you're kind of missing out the whole human part, and it's not going to work, and you just end up with something cruel and heartless. But anyway, let's get to Gadsad and see what he has to say about all of this. He says that Sam Harris is very mad at Joe Rogan. So Gadsad has been, what's the word I could use here? Brutal with Sam Harris. I think they used to be friends, but no, he's been very tough on Sam Harris, and I think for good reason. Let's hear.
Hi, everybody. This is Gatsad. I just saw a clip on X where Sam Harris is sharing his profound disappointment that Joe Rogan would allow all sorts of people on his platform that, quote, spread disinformation and misinformation. He mentions a guy by the name of Dave Smith. I'm not exactly sure who he is. I know he's some kind of anti-Israel guy. And then he mentions the fact that he speaks to guys like Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump and so on. And these guys are way too dangerous to be given this platform. Again, this demonstrates the consequentialist bent that Sam has when it comes to freedom of speech, freedom of inquiry, open debate in a free society. I may not like what Dave Smith says about Israel, and I might think that it's completely wrong. The few snippets I've seen, I, don't think very highly of his analyses. But I certainly have never had the reflex to go in public and say, "Hey, Joe, why are you letting these guys on your show?" Because I completely internalized the deontological principle that in a free society, you speak to people. Now, you may choose not to want to speak to them because you don't want to give them your time. I don't necessarily debate creationists, uh, not because I'm trying to shut their voice, but because I don't think it'll be a worthwhile exchange to discuss evolution with a creationist. There's nothing that I can share with them that would alter their position, and therefore an engagement would be futile. But I never have the reflex to say, "Hey, Elon, why are you allowing these people on X? These people are sending me all kinds of mean anti-Jewish insults. Please cancel their accounts," and so on. Uh, Precisely because I understand that in a free society, short of direct incitement to violence and so on, all bets are off. You either believe in free speech absolutism or you don't. So the reflex that Sam has, which is, you know, there are too many important issues to allow all the rubes, the plebs, the great unwashed to, be exposed to all this. It is for us, the anointed ones, and I, as your leader, the Malibu meditator, to decide who's allowed to speak, who's not allowed to speak, who should be given a platform, who shouldn't be given a platform. I mean, imagine having the gall to go to Joe Rogan, who I obviously know very well. He's a good friend. I've been on his show 11 times. And Sam has been on his show. Imagine now turning on him and saying, "Boy, how come Joe allows some people to go on his show with whom I disagree?" That's not how it works. So, the descent of Sam into immoral consequentialism and violation of every deontological principle continues unabated. And again, it's a very powerful lesson, which is don't commit that fallacy. There is an endless number of things that Sam has said, for example, as relating to COVID, that are profoundly wrong. Imagine if we had said, "Hey, don't allow Sam to go on any shows anymore. He is a purveyor of disinformation and misinformation." No, let him go on shows, let him espouse his position. And then if there are better ideas, then if nothing else, the punishment will be that his words would come back to haunt him. So, more disappointment from the great Malibu meditator. Cheers, everybody.
Yeah, what you notice is that there's just no humility amongst these credentialists, these technocrats who, Sam Harris clearly believes that he has the credentials that that give him authority to speak when other people can't because they don't have his credentials. He is the anointed one. He is one of the anointed ones whose words matter. Nobody else's do. And as for Dave Smith is very big. He talks a lot about the Israel Gaza thing. I don't agree with him either. I mean, I don't think that Canada, frankly, should have anything to do with it personally. But, the thing is, I could be wrong. And that's what's missing from these people, these credentialists, these technocrats. They just can't, they can't even, they cannot entertain the idea, even an atom of an idea, that they might be wrong. Right. And that's really the value of free expression, freedom of speech, having lots of ideas out there, right? Because it kind of tests your own theories. But they don't want their ideas tested because they're already right. They know that. They've got the piece of paper that tells them that they're right. The piece of paper they got 30 years ago or whatever. So I think it's very sad what happened to Sam Harris. And I feel like he wasn't always like that. that he wasn't always this absolute total elitist, credentialist, but he is now, and it's just kind of sad. In fact, it's more than kind of sad. It's very sad, actually. But anyway, let's move along. Let's get to the chat, actually. All right. Let's see. What's going on with the chat here? Thank God the chat's working again. Thank God it's working again. All right. What are you guys saying? Let's get to it quickly. Let's see. Rosie says, I bet Jordan Peterson believes academic institutions are run with reason. LOL not. No, Jordan Peterson doesn't think that. He thinks they're completely corrupt at this point. And I believe that Jordan Peterson feels that they're actually just a complete write-off at this point. They need to be completely remade from the ground up. Totally ideologically captured. Rosie says, immoral consequentialism, good term. Yeah. Let's see. Spambot, how you doing? Good to see you. All right. All right, so let's get to the next thing then. Gonna try, I keep saying this, we're gonna try not to go too late tonight. Keep it to a couple of hours, but we'll see how it goes. Okay. Let's get to Mark Carney here from Table Salt. Breaking, a video has resurfaced of Mark Carney stating that he offered pro bono consulting to politicians so that Brookfield shareholders could profit from the policies. This is massive. Well, let's watch and let's see if he actually said that.
If funding, which is now increasingly available, or capital, which is now increasingly available, is the second step and policy is the first.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you may be seeing a path back to the public sector?
Well, I do spend some time advising on what, again, pro bono, but advising on the types of policies that are going to have maximum impacts for investors. So I'll give you an example, which is one of the issues. It's not the biggest issue. It's like 2% of global emissions. You wouldn't know it from the headlines, but 2% of global emissions is for air travel, emissions from air travel. Now, so the question is, are we going to have green, sustainable aviation fuel? What's happened in the UK, the EU, is they've said to major airlines, look, if you're flying in and out of Heathrow or wherever, you have to have 10% of your load has to be sustainable aviation fuel by, I think it's 2030. Consequence of that policy has been to convert some entrepreneurs in Texas, in this case, a company called Infineon, to become economic, because all of a sudden American Airlines, British Airways need to buy that fuel. They'll pay a green premium. You've got an offtake, that's high credit quality. And so in that case, we Brookfield put $1 billion to work there, and it's a fantastic opportunity. The point being, without the policy, the policy has to drive it and drive things down. So yeah, I'm dodging your question.
I know, I know you're dodging.
And look at the time.
I look at the time. 20 minutes left. We have all the time to come back to this.
Okay, so essentially, yes. So he's been advising government, Canadian government. Obviously, he's been advising Trudeau since 2020. Trying to push them into policy which would benefit the companies that he's invested in, that Brookfield is invested in. And now he's prime minister. And he still has deferred share units for Brookfield. Is anybody starting to see how there might be some perverse incentives here for Mark Carney? How the whole thing might just be perverse, frankly. Perhaps there's a giant conflict of interest happening here. Perhaps Mark Carney's perhaps what's of most import to Mark Carney is not the Canadian people and the welfare of the Canadian people, the economic welfare of the Canadian people, but maybe his top concern is Brookfield, his own investments, and I think above it all, his own net zero ideology. Because he's been talking about this for a long time. He's been pushing this for a long time. He wrecked the British economy. I mean, when he was head of the Bank of England, about printing too much money, but also forcing upon the people, pushing hard, forcing upon Britain his net zero policies, which resulted in England having, or the UK having, the highest energy costs in Europe, and pensioners having to choose between buying food and heating their homes in the winter. So this feels like a guy who's more concerned with the idea, with the abstract, than with reality, than how it will actually affect people. Right? He sounds like an ideologue who's concerned about the idea, the abstraction, not the person who's real in the real world. So how is this guy prime minister? It's insane. And what is this sustainable jet fuel? Well, let's take a look. Now that we're watching this, let's take a look. Hold on.
Fact check.
We'll just go to Grok for this one. Let's see. What is sustainable jet fuel? And is it effective? Let's see. All right. Let's see what Grok has to say here. Sustainable jet fuel, often referred to as sustainable aviation fuel. That's right. Sustainable aviation fuel is a type of biofuel designed to power aircraft with a lower environmental impact compared to traditional fossil-based jet fuels, just like kerosene. So a biofuel design, usually what they do is that they'll have to take a huge amounts of farmland to grow something that they can turn into the biofuel, which is not actually great for people. It's produced from renewable or waste-derived feedstocks, such as used cooking oil, agricultural residues, municipal solid waste, algae, or even captured carbon dioxide combined with hydrogen. The goal is to reduce the aviation industry's carbon footprint, which accounts for 2 to 3% of global CO2 emissions, blah, blah, blah. The production process typically involves converting these feedstocks into hydrocarbons through methods like hydroprocessing, hydrotreated esters, fatty acids, HEFA, blah, blah, blah. Okay, can be blended. Effectiveness pros, carbon reduction, SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, can reduce life cycle CO2 emissions by up to 80% compared to fossil jet fuel, depending on the feedstock and production process. This is because the carbon released during combustion was recently absorbed from the atmosphere by plants or waste rather than being extracted from ancient fossil reserves. All right, let's go to the cons here. Limited supply. As of now, makes up less than 1% of global jet fuel use. It's 2 to 4 times more expensive than conventional jet fuel due to high production costs and limited economies of scale. So what we see is it actually makes very little difference. So regardless of how much aviation is responsible for emissions, this is only dealing with a very small part of it, right? So it's not something that would even be noticed. It's also 2 to 4 times more expensive. It just sounds good for somebody like Mark Carney, who can give us a little speech like he did there. But it makes everything more expensive. So you see, when I'm talking about, he's interested in the idea, the abstraction, more than he's interested in the real world costs for people. Let's see. Feedstock constraints. Relying on waste streams, used cooking oil, has limits. There's only so much available. Switching to crops like corn or palm oil risks deforestation or competition with food production, undermining sustainability. This is what I was talking about. It takes, to create this, enough of it, it takes huge amount, or not, it's not even enough of it, right? Just to create it in mass. It requires huge amounts of agricultural land, which is going to be removed from the human food chain, making food much more expensive and maybe resulting in, I don't know, hunger, things like that. When people don't get food, what happens? How about this? Energy intensity. Some production methods, like synthetic fuels from CO2 and hydrogen, require significant energy inputs, which could offset benefits if that energy isn't renewable. So, is it effective? Yes, in a technical sense. It works and cuts emissions per flight, but its real-world impact is still negligible due to scale and cost barriers. It's a step forward, not a silver bullet, and its success hinges on whether governments and industry commit to making it ubiquitous rather than a niche experiment. But they won't do that because it drives up the cost by 2 to 4 times. So, again, Mark Carney's very interested in the idea because it just sounds good to him. It's the sort of thing when he goes to dinner parties with his friends from Davos. It all sounds great, and they're insulated from it. It doesn't matter to them if it costs 4 times more to fly. They don't care. It's not going to affect them at all. This is how these guys wreck everything. This is why Canada's in the state that it's in. This guy was advising Trudeau at least since 2020, and I think probably since the beginning. I think this guy was Trudeau's mentor. You can see why things get so badly so quickly when things are run by technocrats, ideologues, people who are insulated from the real world consequences of their ideology, of their hobbies. I don't know, what do you want to call it? Their fancies. This stuff to me is very damning because it shows you this is somebody who's not thinking about the regular person. He's thinking about his own interests, whether or not they be financial or ideological or reputational. All right, let's keep going. So how about this? Now, the polls are starting to tighten up in Canada, and I think they're going to start switching very quickly, even though I think the polls right now in Canada are not. I think they're overweighting seniors who are by far Carney's biggest supporters. And I think there's a huge silent majority in this country, similar to what you saw in 2016 with the kind of shy Trump voter. I think there's something like that happening in Canada too. And just a lot of people that haven't voted before or voted rarely, haven't voted for a while, who now are very motivated, and they are going to make sure they get out and go stand in line and get their vote in. I don't think those people are being captured, but stuff like this isn't going to help. So on Friday, Stats Canada announced 48,000 private sector job losses, mostly full-time. Job losses, total job losses at 33,000. So, and this is from Brian Lilly. In the United States, the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced an increase of 228,000 jobs added. Remember, though, Mark Carney is an economic star. Well, I think you have to cut him a little bit of a break. He hasn't been prime minister for that long. Until you remember, oh yeah, he's been advising Trudeau since 2020 at least. Been Trudeau's economic advisor. So I guess you can pin this on him. Will the people of Canada wake up and deliver a majority government to the Conservatives? I don't know. I still think so, but I'm not certain anymore. Cat Canada posted this. Everyone should share this video once a day until the election. Well, here's Jordan Peterson, no fan of Trudeau and no fan of Trudeau's mentor, Mark Carney. Some people call him Mark's Carney.
Inevitable grand poobah of the currently wretched but still dangerously powerful Liberals. One Mark Carney is one of the world's prime advocates of the insane inanities of net zero. He is a man who has planned in writing, not least in his best-selling book, Values, the complete destruction of the fossil fuel industry. Bye-bye, Alberta, if that's not bad enough. And it is. He's also simultaneously an advocate of the same post-national view of Canada defined by Trudeau Jr. and his moralistic minions. What are we, according to such good thinkers? Nothing. But if anything, the oppressive, patriarchal, white, supremacist, identityless, colonial settler state defined by the progressive ideologues in the think tanks and elite dining rooms in Eastern Canada and the protest encampments on the campuses of Canadian universities. None of this fills the MAGA crowd with admiration, in case it needs to be said. None of it bodes well either for the economy of Canada, doomed to replacement, according to Carney, by the hydrogen, solar, and wind power that either does not exist, that would be hydrogen, or that would doom Canadians to starve and freeze in the dark if it ever came to replace the reliable grid and transportation we also desperately depend on when it's 40 bloody below. We may, when arguing so expensively and incompetently with the Americans, continue to congratulate ourselves on our comparative righteousness. That diet will become even thinner gruel, however, in a future characterized by their explosive economic growth and our rapid descent toward comparative poverty and irrelevance, green though that pathway may be argued, however falsely to be. Carney, to put it bluntly, is not a man like Justin Trudeau, a second-rater, under the mere influence of the World Economic Forum, that Malthusian fear-mongering cabal of authoritarian elitists, drunk on the fumes of their own self-righteous delusions. He is, by contrast, a veritable leader of that movement, an organizer par excellence of ESG, stakeholder capitalism, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, and degrowth. Out with the old, the Liberals claim, and in with the new. But the new will be everything Trudeau so terribly was, but a lot more efficiently.
I think the thing about Mark Carney, and of course Jordan Peterson is completely right there, but I think the thing about Mark Carney is that he's been promoted as this kind of brilliant economist, this genius economist, and I see nothing more than a very mediocre intellect. I think he's a guy who just somehow got into the right school, and he got it. He all the way along, he figured out what to say, and he said it, and he's managed to fail upwards, right up into the prime ministership of Canada. I've seen nothing from him that shows any kind of intellectual flair. I mean, certainly we've seen him talking enough. We've seen him lying plenty about silly things too. Not all of his lies are silly. Some of them are just silly and easily checked and debunked. I'm not seeing this master intelligence there. I'm not. I see a mediocre intelligence at best. I think he's a guy who got into the right currents, and if you're willing to just say that you believe the right things in those currents, they will just keep carrying you along. That's what I'm seeing here. That's what I'm seeing. What is his great legacy exactly? I mean, he likes to pretend that he saved the economy in 2008. Well, no, he didn't. He did what he was told. Now, he went to the Bank of England where he had a lot more power, and that was not a success story. He's despised in the UK by anybody who knows what they're talking about anyway. But he's not a popular figure over there. His Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero has been a failure. Even the Canadian banks dropped out of it because it's too stupid. It's too pointless. And here he is now, Prime Minister of Canada. He was just parachuted in. He was just given the red carpet by the media, by the Liberal Party itself, went through a charade of a Liberal leadership campaign, and was just handed everything. And I think his purpose now is to revive his reputation as an eco-warrior. I think that's his purpose, as well as enriching himself as well, and his friends. But anyway, that's what I think. I don't think highly of Mark Carney. Let's see. What else have we got? What else have we got? Then we'll get back to the chat. Let's see. Brian Lilly says, Carney wants everyone to pay their fair share of taxes. Well, not him or Brookfield. For those matters, he uses tax havens in Bermuda. Because rules for thee, but not for me. Again, I mean, he's a self-described elitist globalist. What more? What do you think? What do you think he's going to do?
Judy Trins, CTV News. Good morning, Mr. Carney. You were at the helm of a company that quite clearly registered much of its business in Bermuda to avoid paying taxes, including, as CTV News reported, registered to an address of a bike shop in Bermuda. You have said that this is the way the world works, and that in the case of pension funds, that leaves more money for pensioners. But in this case, it looks like just plain tax avoidance.
He keeps telling us that he knows the way the world works. Is he just really saying he knows the way the world works for him? Because it seems like it.
This may be a legal practice, and as you say, as the world works, but is it ethical, Mr. Carney?
First off, I'm no longer at Brookfield. Secondly,
first off, so what?
This follows, their arrangements follow the rules, including the tax rules of this country, other countries. And
you did not really respond to the question as to your opinion as to if it was ethical, but let me follow up.
What he's really saying is, yes, we followed the rules. And of course, the rules for elites like myself are different than for the hoi polloi, than they are for the dirty, filthy, unwashed masses that I rule over.
On that, you wrote a book, Values. The thesis of that book was that capitalism or markets left to their own devices don't help humanity. For years, your party, the Liberal Party, has promised to stop the practice of tax avoidance that Brookfield and other companies have engaged in. Do you have the tools to do that? You said so. When are you going to release and tell Canadians what those tools are, and when will you implement them?
In terms of having a fair tax system in Canada, including for corporate taxation, it's absolutely a priority of my government. If we are re-elected, it'd be a priority of our government to ensure that our companies are paying their fair share of taxes.
Yeah, I think we know what his priority is, and it's not for Canadians. How about this from Canada Proud? Do Canadians really want 4 years of this on top of 10 years of this? Let's see. After just 3 weeks, Mark Carney already has a lot of scandals. Moved Brookfield to New York City and lied about it. He did. Claimed fentanyl is not a crisis. It is. Refused a major French debate because his French is poor and he knows that it would hurt him. Caught stuffing money in tax havens. Yes. Fact check true. Defended an MP threatening people on China's behalf. Fact check true. Claimed he prevented a recession in 2008. He did not. Hired an advisor who wants to bring in 60 million immigrants to Canada. That's Mark Wiseman from the Century Initiative. And he wants to bring Canada's population up to 100 million. So we need another 60 or 59. I don't know. It's not looking good. The CBC, nobody watches the CBC. That's about 5% of the country watches CBC. But that 5% is very heavily represented by seniors in Canada. Those are really the only people who watch it anymore. It's no coincidence that that's his main base of support, his big base of support. He's got a big lead over Pierre Poilievre amongst boomers. It's because they're sitting watching CBC. Also, they will be watching CNN, CNN, MSNBC. A lot of Canadians watch American news. That's why he has the lead with these people, because they don't see anything other than what's read to them off teleprompters on the CBC. Which is why he's promising to give them an extra $150 million, which is just bribery, is it not? Let's see. From Ask Why, let's face it, Carney has few talking points after his actions are becoming public. Mr. Carney costs the average Canadian household an additional $500 in taxes by moving Brookfield's profits to this official office in the tax haven of Barbados. Yeah, it's over a bike shop, I believe. The $80 billion asset manager Brookfield, their office there is that. It's like a room above a bike shop. I mean, it's the same every time. Like with these modern leftist leaders, it's like it's the same every time. Look at Joe Biden and his family, just totally corrupt, but the media covers for them because they like them. Let's see. All right, so we covered this stuff already. Let's move on. Let's go back to the chat for a second. Let's see. Let's see. What do we got? I'm just going back through the chat here. All right. Spambot says, "Oh my God, I absolutely love the I find retards post on X. I know, I like them too. It's just a funny little thing that pops up. Found one." Let's see. Spambot says, Sam Harris went insane in 2015 in the lead up to the first inauguration of Trump in 2016. Yeah, that's about when he went crazy. Because Trump wasn't credentialed. Turtle says, yes, retard stick. It's funny. Got to get a retard stick. Turtle says, super bummed Jordan went after Candace over religion. Ugh. Yeah, I don't agree with everything that he says, but I don't have to, and that's the beauty of it, right? That's the beauty of it. I can accept that some people are going to disagree. Even people that I like a lot and I respect in a lot of ways are going to disagree with me on some things. And that's okay. We're allowed to have that. That's the kind of society that I want to live in. I don't want to live in a society where somebody disagrees with you on one thing and now they're canceled and you can never listen to them again and they're evil, blah, 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 blah. Hey, look, Sam Harris, look, I read his book on meditation, Waking Up, and I'm glad I read that book. It was a good book. I read his book on lying. Excellent book. I would recommend it to anybody, right? Unfortunately, he's totally Trump deranged. Unfortunately. But maybe he'll come back. I don't know. But it's not like he's got absolutely nothing to offer. It's just that where he's wrong, he's just gone so over the top. And it overshadows the places where he's done good things. Rosie says, you would think the written book would be read and heated. Are you talking about Carney's book? Yeah, nobody's going to read it. I'm probably one of like 200 people in Canada who actually own it. Turtle says, watched a show on totalitarianism on the Angel Studios networks. Scary next step for the Western world. Yeah, that's where the modern leftist leaders are authoritarians and or totalitarians, and they look at China with envy. And that's what they have planned for us. Streamer says, listening while making a pot of pork vegetable stew. Well, that sounds good, but it's good that you're listening. It always makes pork vegetable stew better. Radio Baloney, I mean. It's the most important ingredient. Radio Streamer says, hello, my fellow degenerate basket of deplorables, orange Hitler following non-neon hair dye countrymen and women. Good to meet you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Let's see. Turtle says, started watching Tasting History with Mac something. Fun show. Tasting History. I've never heard of it. Is that like one of those shows where they go back and they'll make like Middle Eastern, not Middle Eastern, like medieval pottage or something? They'll make like mead from some 12th century recipe or something. Because I've seen something like that. Maybe I've seen that show. Fascinating stuff. Turtle says, orange filter activated on CNN. I saw that. They did the same thing they did to Joe Rogan when he took the ivermectin. And they put a filter on and made him look all sick, even though he was perfectly fine. But they've done that before with Trump. They've done that. I think they just do that every time, don't they? Spambot says, CBC is a punchline. Yeah, it's a joke. but it has, man, it is delivering the boomer vote to Carney. Let's see. Someone says Rumble is glitching again for me. That's a bummer. Well, I'm happy on this end that, you know, the chat's working again, so that's good. Let's see. Spambot says, I will no longer recommend anything of Sam Harris. Well, I mean, that's fair enough. Don't ever fund retards. Retards, he says. Don't ever fund retards. Well, if you find a used copy of Lying, that's actually a worthwhile book. It's basically his little treatise against lying, and I think there's a lot of very good in that book. All right, so I guess we'll cut off the YouTube part right now. So anybody watching on YouTube, come join us over on Rumble. There's always way more people over here. The chat's busy. Come join us over here. Don't stay over on Stalin Tube, Mao Tube, Pol Pot Tube, Castro Tube, whatever you want to call it. 1984 Tube. Come join us on Rumble. We are also we're going to continue on X, Rumble, and Locals. So you can continue watching the rest of the show on any of those. But if not, we will see you next time.